So the question is, what happens when you have one of these pieces of space junk crash into something else? And that's really, they're traveling pretty fast. That may not be as big of a deal. It's when that crashes into something else and you get this cascading effect of things crashing into other things. And now you've got a ring of junk around the Earth that we can't fire a satellite up in anymore, a rocket up into orbit. And that will, in a good case, a year or two. In a bad case, decades. We'd have to wait before being able to launch another rocket. We are back with another episode of the Cold Star Project, the podcast about the unexpected challenges of scaling, including with space startups. And I have here the founder of a space startup, Charles Radley. Charles, you are the founder of Pixie, which is about predicting collisions of space objects. And Fraser Kane and I got into this a little bit in previous episode. There's a thing called the Kessler Syndrome, which is named after the scientist who proposed it in 1978. And this thing has been near and dear to my heart after I found out about it, because it's freaking terrifying. It's the idea of, as we put up more and more stuff into orbit, satellites and that, and they stop working, they're just going to go around as space junk and eventually lose orbit. And I understand there has been a collision already, right, Charles?
Well, there have been many collisions, but most of them we don't hear about. One of them, there was a very highly publicized collision involving the Iridium-33 satellite in February 2009, which was a major loss. It was like a $50 million loss. And it was the first publicly announced loss of a operational commercial satellite as a result of a collision. There have been collisions that have not caused a total loss of a spacecraft. There have been multiple collisions of the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle, for example. Chips of paint have hit the windows, but fortunately there was no real damage as a result. But there are other spacecraft of other countries that may have been destroyed that we would never hear about. There are some countries that would not necessarily publicly admit that they lost a spacecraft, for example, for various security reasons. So we don't have the whole picture. So it's possible that what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg.
And that is, a part of the problem that you want to help solve, is that we don't have all the information. So what's wrong with today's detection of collision technology?
Okay, well, there's a couple of issues. One of the lessons that was learned from the Iridium-33 collision was that I think the community had a bit of a false sense of security. And we learned that we don't actually know where objects are with as much of a degree of precision as we would like, or as we thought they had. Most people have been relying in large part or sometimes entirely on data released by the United States Department of Defense, the Stratcom NORAD two-line elements, and those are nominal values. Okay. And as a scientist and engineer, I have always been taught that, quoting a number really means nothing unless you give it an error dispersion, a confidence level. And NORAD never did that. They were just publishing nominal values, and everybody assumed that those numbers were accurate. NORAD never made any, and to this day, Stratcom has never made any claim as to the accuracy of the numbers which they're releasing. And it turns out those numbers are not particularly accurate. And that is a piece of information that Stratcom doesn't really want the public to know. It turns out that the accuracy of their orbital element predictions is classified. It's secret. It is intentionally not published, and that would be for military security reasons. Those elements are produced by sensors, detector arrays, a space fence, tracking assets like that, whose primary purpose is to detect incoming ballistic missiles, and incoming hostiles. and they don't want the bad guys to know how accurate or inaccurate those systems are.
Mm-hmm.
So they will never, it is extremely unlikely that they will ever publish the accuracy. Now, how accurate, however, if you're going to be in the business of collecting positions, it is absolutely imperative that you have a very good handle on your accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't have that.
So,
The best we, there is now anecdotal data. People have now tried to use, alternate data sources, and we tried to reverse engineer how accurate the Stratcom data is, and it looks like it's at least a kilometer off, possibly a couple of kilometers off. And one data point we have, for example, was the Iridium 33 satellite. The prediction for the what they call conjunctions, or close approaches of spacecraft, are called conjunctions. And the prediction in the case of Iridium 33 in February 2009 was the Cosmos satellite would miss by a distance of 584 meters. Okay, so that collision was predicted, and it was predicted to have a miss distance of 584 meters. So we know that the error is at least 584 meters.
right.
Probably a lot more. It turns out that there were other conjunctions of Iridium 33 that were predicted that month, many conjunctions actually, and the conjunction with the Cosmos did not make the top 10 list for that month. So it was ignored.
Okay.
And
So
when it happened, it was a complete surprise.
yeah, some serious problems there with a bad margin of error, unknown how big it is, and that desire to keep that classified. Yeah, it's not very helpful. So how can we get the precision and accuracy of collision detection improved?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways of doing it. One way is to build sort of bigger and better radar systems and optical tracking systems. That's a pretty expensive undertaking. And believe it or not, there is at least one company I know that's doing that, Leo Labs, and I wish them the very best of luck. And they're doing a good job, but it's pretty expensive, many tens of millions of dollars. Even then, if you're doing it based with ground stations and ground radar stations, you're still quite limited in your coverage. I mean, right now, Leo Labs has 2 stations, and they're building a third one. And in low Earth orbit, any satellite, that means that any satellite will be out of view for at least 90% of the time. Okay, and while the satellite is out of view, the errors will tend to increase. So it's a good start, but it's not going to solve the problem. We at Space now, to be more accurate, I'm co-founder of a company called Space Initiatives, and the product we're planning is called Pixie. So I'm, and I have my partner currently is Marshall Eubanks. We co-founded the company, and we have 2 other shareholders now as well. But the idea of the Pixie is to put these little tiny transponder black boxes onto spacecraft. We would like to see that from now on, or from as soon as we can get funding, every spacecraft that is ever launched should carry these little Pixie transponders. And the way they work, they each carry a GPS receiver. So with the GPS receiver, your position accuracy goes to 10 meters already. So you're getting from, maybe 2 or 3 kilometers down to 10 meters. So that's 2 orders of magnitude right there. Okay. And then to improve matters more, we can downlink the data 24/7. We are not limited to ground stations. We are going to use commercial satellite networks. And there are at least 3 available, and I'll name names of 3 in low Earth orbit that we're looking at. There's Iridium, Globalstar, and Orbcomm. And then there's also up in geosynchronous orbit and Inmarsat. There are pros and cons to using these different systems. We're probably more likely to use a LEO system than a GEO system, because that way we have smaller antennas as the primary reason. but we can downlink the data continuously, and the subscription rates on these commercial communication satellite systems are remarkably inexpensive, and we're talking like $10 to $20 a month. All right, I mean, compare that with, I mean, I don't know how much it costs to subscribe to the Leo Lab system, but I seriously doubt they can get down to a price point that's anywhere close to that.
Hmm.
And in fact, that's a little misleading, because the pricing is not driven by that. Okay, there are other factors that cause us to charge more than that. But the basic cost of the satellite system to get the data down 24/7 is trivial. Um, and this, by the way, are very low data rate, low bandwidth downlinks. It's not voice quality, certainly not video quality. We just download something like 500 bytes every few minutes. Okay. And for that kind of, it's called a machine to machine, it's Internet of Things type service. That's where you have rates of $10 to $20 a month. And that is perfectly adequate for downloading GPS data. Okay. And that's basically all we can do. We figure these little devices will be solar powered. They'll have a little solar panel on it, a little battery, so it'll operate in the dark part of the orbit. And so we figure these things will be, about the size of a cell phone. And and we will not really be selling these devices. We will be selling the tracking service. We'll be selling subscriptions to a tracking service. So what happens? The positional data that comes downlink down from the picture will go to an analysis center on Earth, right? And in this analysis center, there will be computational engines and software, which will be used for making orbital predictions. And these predictions will be better than what anybody else has right now. Well, there's one caveat on that. There is one group of people that already has exceptionally good accuracy of their tracking on spacecraft, and that is the remote sensing community. And also, I am sure the intelligence reconnaissance community also has very accurate knowledge, but that comes at a high price. They have very specially equipped ground stations with atomic clocks and very accurate GPS receivers, which they calibrate their GPS receivers with these atomic clocks on the ground stations. And it's a pretty complicated exercise. You can do it, and they can get down to like 10 centimeter level accuracy on their spacecraft, which is what they need for getting their imagery. Okay, because they're in the business of providing very accurate imagery. All right, but our service is for everybody. Okay, we intend to extend the accuracy of orbital positioning knowledge to the entire space satellite operated community.
Right, and so you want an affordable solution here to this accuracy problem, and there's a way to get quite good enough accuracy at a low price, really. And so why hasn't anyone done this yet? What's standing in the way?
Well, some people are doing it experimentally, but nobody's really bringing it to a mass market yet. The idea, I don't know, we don't have the funding to really bring the product to market yet. So we're looking for, something around $2 million is what we figure would be the budget that we would need to bring the product to market, including a flight test on the International Space Station. We've had some discussions with the ISS National Laboratory Organization. So we're all set to fly an experiment, a proof of concept demonstration on the International Space Station. Okay. That would all be included within our $2 million price tag. That would also include getting the ground control center prediction service up and running, which would probably involve partnering with one of the existing companies. There are several companies out there that are offering prediction services. We would probably partner with somebody rather than do it all from scratch. Another part of it is there's a fair bit of money would need to go into marketing and community education, if you will, getting the word out. Uh, and one thing I think that would help a lot, and that we have some budget for it, is to get governments to either encourage or mandate that spacecraft operators carry these devices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are the problem of orbital debris has gotten to a point where there are many countries, including the United States, do have regulations in place. And in order for a United States company to launch a spacecraft, they need to get at least 2 licenses, depending on the nature of the spacecraft. They do need a license from the FCC and a license from the FAA. Both of those organizations require an analysis to be performed by the spacecraft operator to demonstrate the lifetime of the spacecraft, the probability of a collision with another spacecraft, and methods by which the spacecraft can be deorbited at the
Mm-hmm.
end of life.
Right.
I would say those are the analyses that people are doing. I haven't really gotten into the numbers, but the analyses would be greatly improved by having a better knowledge of where the spacecraft is. So
Mm-hmm.
I think our Pixie will help people to come up with much better analysis for the purposes of obtaining the licenses. So
Right.
that's one incentive why people might want to subscribe to these services.
Okay. Yeah, and that's one thing that we talked about on a previous episode is the end of life of the satellite. There's a lot of stuff that has been thrown up there with no end of life plan at all. Just, oh well, we'll just
Yes,
leave it there and see what happens, and that ain't
right,
great.
right.
So
Exactly. Then there needs to be more done, I think, on the international platform, maybe through the United Nations and organizations like that, to encourage um, that, many countries are putting objects into space, and everybody in that business needs to have a common set of practices that everybody
mhm.
agrees to, that we're gonna limit the problem by doing these things. In the case of civil aviation, for example, there's ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Authority, or no, organization, and just nearly every country in the world is a member of that, and everybody agrees that there's going to be certain practices on how air traffic control is managed, and safety of commercial aircraft and things like that. So we need something like that for spacecraft, but
Mhm.
nothing like that currently exists.
Okay. Yeah, and that is interesting. I mean, yeah, you don't want a different process for landing a plane in Dubai than you do from Montreal or something, right? It would make life very difficult. So, yeah,
Exactly,
some kind
exactly.
of a
Yeah,
standard
yeah.
is required. And I guess it will have to develop over time because necessity will require it. What about the military side of things here? I mean, I can see getting commercial adoption and businesses going, okay, yes, when we put up a satellite, we're going to put a Pixie on it and have an end of life plan for it, and that'll go into some central repository and be collated so that we know, all right, here's what's going to happen. But aren't the militaries of the world going to remain kind of selfish and keep their data to themselves?
Well, that's entirely possible, and that's certainly a problem. And a big problem
Mm-hmm.
is that getting commercial satellite operators to share data. Not Satellite operators do not routinely share this kind of operator data, whether they be military or otherwise. It's just obviously, especially so with the military satellites.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's part of what we would try to facilitate. We would try to make it easy. I guess commercial operators are sort of scared of releasing proprietary data by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But with the Pixie, they're not going to release anything proprietary. It's just GPS data. That's all it is. There's no data about the state or health of the host spacecraft. The host spacecraft may or may not be working. The
Mm-hmm.
Pixie is completely independent of that. The idea is the Pixie is going to be more reliable than the host spacecraft, so it will continue working even when the host spacecraft has died for whatever reason. Um, so yes, the stovepiping is a problem, and we do intend to have a common repository which is accessible to all subscribers. It's not going to be open source. You're going to have to pay for it if you want
Yeah.
access to the data. We would like the military to be part of that. We've not really had any conversations with the military at this point. It's too early. But we would like the military to participate and to allow us to put the data in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because otherwise
some,
you're
you know, the,
stuck with the Stratcom data and having to sort of maneuver around some sort of error zone that you can estimate, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Data, you know.
there are some military satellites where the military does not want people to know exactly where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they would be specifically excluded from the system.
Hmm.
But hopefully there are some which are less sensitive and where they will share the data.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
that sounds like a potential for trouble.
absolutely, it's a pretty complicated process. Yeah, because there are a lot of intelligence type satellites where
Mhm.
the operators don't want people to know exactly where they
Right.
are.
Yeah, it makes sense if we stick a satellite over some Ukrainian city or something, you know, we
Yeah, yeah,
probably don't want the Ukrainians or the Russians to know that we're
yeah,
looking,
yeah.
right? So
Right, but
very, very
they
true.
could, but they're still, that they could still collide with something.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. The
So
risk is always there, isn't it? So you
yeah,
get
yeah.
Pixie up and running, let's say, you get user adoption. What happens when you get a potential collision warning? You've got your simulator and it says, hey, these two things are about to collide.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that'll be part of the conjunction analysis
Mhm.
service, and everybody who subscribes will get advance warning, probably a few hours warning, and that this is already happening today. There are already companies that are publishing collision warnings. Um, it's just they're not particularly accurate, and we're going to be doing better. But yeah, the standard procedure is there's a warning that comes out a few hours ahead of time, and the satellite operator makes a judgment call, and different operators may have different criteria, but typically, if they see a collision is going to be, say, 500 meters or less, then they will do what's called a collision avoidance maneuver, or COLA, and they'll fire a thruster. And usually they'll fire the thruster to raise the orbit slightly rather than lower the orbit,
Mm-hmm.
because they tend to have to raise the orbit anyway from time to time.
Right.
So they'll just do a quick impromptu orbit raising maneuver, something where they may be planning to do one in a couple of weeks. Well, we'll do it in an hour just to
Right.
make sure we get out of the way. But once they've done that, then we'll immediately have to recalculate the orbit and figure out, they may have
Where's it
gotten out
going
of the way of
now?
one object, but have they
Yeah.
put themselves straight in the track of another object? So it's an ongoing orbital ballet. Um,
Right.
it
Okay.
never ends.
No, it does not. Is there anything else that you would like the public or a potential investor to know?
Yeah, well, we're ready. I mean, the other thing perhaps I could add is that I mentioned some people are doing it experimentally. So yeah, NASA has a spacecraft called TechEdSat, which is using the Iridium service. There's a group in Indiana at a university out there that's launching what they call ThinSats. They're using the Global Star service. Um, and I have that's public information. I have some non-public information about some other services that are being used, but I will not talk about those
Hmm.
right now. But we do know that those two work, because they've been demonstrated. And one thing we plan to do for our experiment on the space station is we plan to do both. We plan to do a comparison of the Iridium and the Global Star, and see if we can figure out, you know, are there any pros and cons of one over the other? Because right now we are open. We have not selected a transponder,
Right.
but I don't think we're going to have both in our production version. We're going to pick one or the other. So that's a decision we'll have to make, and we'll do that once we've had our space station experiment flying.
Okay.
And once we've done that, we will make a decision on which one we're going to mass produce. Um,
Okay.
and prototype, and we believe we can get to market in 18 months.
Hmm.
Uh,
So pretty quick.
uh,
Yeah.
if we got if we got 2 million, which I think is that is ample to get us to market in 18 months. If we had less than 2 million, we could still get to market, but it would take a little longer.
Okay. Yeah, simulation thing, got to partner up with somebody and just get that prototype working. So how can people connect with you? You know, if they want to follow you or find out more.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. We have a website, www.spaceinitiatives.com. Well, that's space spelled SPACE hyphen initiatives, INIATIVES, basically. And my email address is CFR, which stands for Charles Frank Radley. That's CFR at space-initiatives.com.
Right.
And I also have a phone number, area code 503-922-1012.
All right. Get the most out of it.
We're the Eastern time zone in Florida. Well, I'm in Florida, and my partner, Marshall Eubanks, is in Virginia. And our legal counsel is in New York, so we're all in the Eastern time zone.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being on. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and good luck with the project.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me. It's been a real pleasure.
You bet.